Steps in developing rubrics. Number 1, review learning objectives. Identify what you want students to do or to accomplish as the learning outcomes. It simply states what students are expected to know or be able to do upon completion. Students' learning outcomes should be clear, observable, measurable, and to reflect what else to develop and will be included. The students will have the idea and be aware of what and how they will going to do the performance task as they follow the structure of the given rubric. Number 2 is the list performance criteria. Develops a list of criteria that reflect the learning objectives and that describe tasks, behaviors, or elements that the students are expected to demonstrate in their performance. The specific behaviors that students should perform to properly carry out a performance, specific observable standards by which students' performance will be assessed, and specific measurable statements defining performance required to meet learning outcomes. With a list of performance criteria, it should be specific, clearly stated, and observable so it will be easier to assess what students have learned, particularly in their performance task. Number 3, describe levels of quality for each criterion. Describe the best and worst levels of quality for each criterion, and then fill in the middle levels to complete the range of performance levels. Define the performance quality of the ideal assessment for each criteria, one at a time. It begins with the highest level of the scale to define top quality performance. Remember, this is the level that you want all students to achieve, and it should be challenging. Make sure that there is a continuity in the difference between the criteria for exceeds versus meets and meets versus does not meet expectations. The difference between a 2 and a 3 performance should not be more than the difference between a 3 and a 4 performance. Next, develop a grid. Using a grid format with columns and rows, listing objectives or expected performance in the first column, and descriptions of various levels of performance in the next columns. Developing a grid and making it available as a tool for students' use will provide the scaffolding necessary to improve the quality of their performance or work and to increase their knowledge. Number 5, add a descriptor or numerical score to each performance level. Use a descriptive word to identify each performance level, such as beginning, developing, accomplished, and exemplary. There are a number of rating scales to utilize. If you want to score or grade the student's work, add a number or rating to each level. Descriptors are explicit descriptions of the performance and show how the score is derived and what is expected of the students. Descriptors spell out each level of performance for each criterion and describe what performance at a particular level looks like. Number 6, practice using the rubric. Before using formally, verify the rubric by using it to evaluate previous student work or practice with students to determine if the rubric is clear, accurate, and covers all potential performance. Ask for student feedback on the usefulness and fairness of the rubric. Using the rubric on real student work before you hold your students accountable with the final grade, test out your new rubric on a few pieces of actual student work. Remember, a carefully designed rubric can provide benefits to instructors and students alike. Number 7, share the rubric with students. Before students assigned activity that will be assessed, share the rubric to them to clarify what is expected in their work. Consider involving students in developing or evaluating a rubric. You can share the rubrics that your students create with colleagues for even further evaluation. Also, take time to calibrate the created rubrics. In the end, make sure your learners understand that rubrics should be organic and let them explore the given rubrics for them to understand and work with their performance task. Number 8, assess students' work. Use the rubric to guide you in assessing how well students performed or their level of mastery in doing the learning activity or assignment. Assessing students' performance can involve assessments that are formal or informal, high or low stakes, anonymous or public, individual or collective. Here, we provide suggestions and strategies for assessing student learning and performance, as well as ways to clarify your expectations and performance criteria to students. And lastly, revise the rubric. Keep track of the strengths and weaknesses of the rubrics as you use it to assess student work. Revise to build in detail and improve communication. Revise the work on the basis of a particular feedback and fix some errors or unseemly to the given performance task or projects. Example of a rubric: performance, agtapik sa tumaray. It is based on MAPE, Kagabitan ng Mag-aaral Ilocano. We can see here a list of 5 criteria which are: number 1, nagay-ayamak a nasayaat. Number 2, sinorot ko nga husto ti pagannurutan ti ayayam. Number 3, nagtarayak a napaspas. Number 4, tinapik ko iti kaeskwelaak a napaspas. And number 5, nasursurok iti nasayaat nga adal iti panagayayam. And on the upper part, we can see the rating scale for performance levels. The first, when awan ti kamali, 5 puntos. When adda maysa wenno 2 a kamali, 4 a puntos. When adda 3 wenno adupay a kamali, 3 a puntos. Ken awan 2 a puntos. We may now proceed on the quarterly assessment. Quarterly assessment measures student learning at the end of the quarter. This may be in the form of objective tests, performance-based assessment, or a combination thereof. There must be sufficient and appropriate instructional interventions to ensure that learners are ready before summative assessments are given. A teacher conducts a quarterly assessment or evaluation to review students' performance, productivity, and creativity. It helps the teacher to guide the students for improvement and development. The evidence produced through summative assessment enables teachers to describe how well the students have learned the standards or competencies for a given quarter. These are then reflected in the class record. The grades of learners are presented in a report card to show the progress of learners to parents and other stakeholders. Summative assessments evaluate the student's achievement of the desired learning outcome at the completion of the course and learning module. Summative assessments are higher stakes and often consist of performance evaluations, authentic writing assignments or projects, or exams. It is very important for the parents of the students to know how they can help their children when it comes to their academic concerns, because they are part of the development and they help the teacher to shape the mentality of each of them. And here are the references of our report.